World War I ended 100 years ago on 11/11/1918. And November 11th is called Armistice Day in Europe, and of course it's Veterans Day here in the U.S. And it's usually a no-brainer that a president will decide to attend ceremonies commemorating major world events like that one, the centennial of the end of World War I. But not our president. He even managed to make a huge mess out of a visit to Paris, paying tribute to war dead and at the end of one of the deadliest wars in history. The president actually bailed on one of the main ceremonies at a cemetery, blaming the rain. The White House justified the decision, saying the president couldn't fly there on Marine One and that his motorcade would be too disruptive. But those concerns didn't stop any other presidents or prime ministers from showing up and taking part. Then at one of the ceremonies that President Trump did show up to, he made a joke about the rain.
In the United States, Armistice Day is now enshrined as Veterans Day. We have a number of amazing veterans with us today, including 6 veterans of World War II. You look so comfortable up there under shelter as we're getting drenched. You're very smart people.
The laughter you heard, though, wasn't shared. In Europe, it's certainly not a laughing matter. Winston Churchill's grandson, Nicholas Soames, is now a member of Parliament. He called Trump pathetic and inadequate, and those are direct quotes. Columnist and author David Frum also tweeting this out. It's incredible that a president would travel to France for the significant anniversary and then remain in his hotel room watching TV rather than pay in person his respects to the Americans who gave their lives in France for the victory gained 100 years ago. Let me remind you briefly of the scope and horror that World War I was. An estimated 8.5 million people were killed. That includes 115,000 Americans. There were 13,000 casualties from New York State alone. French President Emmanuel Macron hosted the weekend, and he made these comments, which were clearly aimed at Trump.
Patriotism is the exact opposite of nationalism. Nationalism is its betrayal. By pursuing our own interests first, with no regard to others, we erase the very thing that a nation holds most precious, that which gives it life and makes it great, its moral values.
And then just to add insult to injury, President Trump met with his BFF, Vladimir Putin, and got a thumbs up from the Russian leader as European leaders were looking on. Here's how the Guardian newspaper in England described it. Quote, Trump looked on grimly during the ceremony. The only moment he brightened up was when he saw Vladimir Putin approach. He flashed a goofy smile, all the more noticeable alongside Macron and Merkel, who had switched their demeanor to steel resolve upon spotting the Russian leader. Putin solemnly shook hands with them and then gave Trump a big thumbs up. Merkel looked on in astonishment and then turned back with a smile on her face that suggested she had come up with a vignette to start the chapter on the Trump-Putin axis in her memoir. Well, let's see what our panel would label this in their memoirs. Dominic Carter is here. He's a political journalist and author. And on the other side of the table, conservative strategist Bill O'Reilly. Bill was the communications director for Mark Molinaro's gubernatorial campaign. You know, we do this every night where we react to something that the president has done or not done in this case. Thoughts, Bill, first on the president sitting in his hotel room in Paris because there was too many wing drops to go to cemetery?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd like to separate the second part of it, the Putin part. To me, that's kind of pile on that happens every night. And, you know, and a lot of people that don't like the president go for all those little hits wherever they can get them. On the cemetery, I think that was deeply unfortunate, to be polite. I was thinking about Reagan at his Point to Hawk speech that Peggy Noonan wrote, which was just so memorable. And you know, when he choked up and half the place did, I think. This was deeply embarrassing to the country. And when you think about how well the French and the Belgians, for that matter, and the Italians take care of our cemeteries in Europe, for him not to go, it was really not his best moment. And I don't say that gratuitously. This was not a good moment for us.
And let's be clear. I mean, I know it was raining and there was a logistical problem, but if he really wanted to go, they would have made it happen. Every time you schedule an event like this, there are redundancies, there are backup plans, just in case you can't fly in the chopper. There was a way to do it if he really wanted to.
He rolled over. I mean, that's the only explanation, is that they said, we can't take the chopper, then forget it. You know what I mean? Keep the CNN on or whatever he's watching. You can't roll over as president, not on military things, not on the 100th anniversary of the war to end all wars. It didn't work out so well. it wasn't good to him. And I separate this from the rest of politics. This is where you have to get it right as a president, and he didn't. And I think that's a lost mark for him historically.
Andrew, one has to wonder if our president is having a meltdown. Not a good couple of last few days for the president of the United States. Let's remember how he left to go to Paris. He was arguing with reporters for a couple of days with reporters. There's the midterm shellacking, if you will. And here's how I define shellacking. Democrats come, January 3rd, will have subpoena power. And that, as it relates to the Russia investigation, is of a paramount concern to this president. So he can sugarcoat it all he wants and talk about the Senate, and rightfully so, perhaps some good victories that they had on election night. But at the end of the day, it looks like we're looking at a meltdown of the U.S. president.
Quickly to what Macron said, Bill, that patriotism is the exact opposite of nationalism. And there's two parts to this. One, that you have the president of France, the prime minister of France, basically correcting the language that the president is using as he's trying to embrace nationalism as a positive. But then two, again, all of our allies, again, putting the president in his place and painting him into a corner.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to peel through that statement a little bit to fully understand it. And I think what he meant was true patriots understand that you do have to work with other governments and you have to work with allies. And the world is a scary place, and it will always be a scary place, 1,000 years before us and 1,000 years
is a dangerous thing.
But
they're seeing new waves of nationalism in Germany, in Belgium, in France, in Eastern Europe. I mean, they're dealing with it more face on than we are.
That's right. I mean, the two, and sometimes I will think Europe goes too far left. It pulls towards socialism sometimes. I don't like it. But when you look at the two forces, it's Russia's pulling kind of a neo-nationalism, and it's coming from our president too. And history suggests that's not going to work out in the long run.
Need to give an update before we take a break, and it's a quick update related to Wall Street. The Dow dropped 600 points today, and guess who President Trump was blaming? Believe it or not, even this gets political for the president. Here's his tweet. The prospect of presidential harassment by the Dems is causing the stock market big headaches. It was really a sell-off in the tech sector. Tech stocks were hammered, led by Apple. Oil prices are also rapidly falling, which dragged down energy stocks today, and a slew of other factors. But, yeah, go ahead and blame Democrats who haven't even taken over yet. We'll take a break. When we come back, a recount in Florida. Sound familiar? Another thing that'll sound familiar, President Trump talking about election fraud without any proof whatsoever.